Good morning, everyone, and thank you for joining our webinar this morning. For anyone that may not know me, my name is Mary-Claire Henry. I'm a Senior Market Advisor for Enterprise Ireland, leading on the healthcare and life science sectors here in the UK. I'm very delighted today to announce the launch of the Roche Diagnostics Enterprise Ireland Incubator programme for Irish diagnostic companies. The programme aims to build on work already undertaken between our two organisations, including a webinar, which I think some of you joined, which we delivered in June last year, that looked at insights to the commercialisation of diagnostics, as well as engagement during Enterprise Ireland's trade mission to London in September, which featured a health tech roundtable with Leah Varadkar, our Taoiseach, as guest speaker. As part of Enterprise Ireland's remit, our role is to support and accelerate the growth of Irish startups and SMEs. And so we very much value the opportunity collaborations like this offer to our client companies. For the selected company, you will benefit from bespoke mentorship delivered by a multinational company, a leader in the field of diagnostics. Some quick housekeeping before I go through today's agenda. The webinar is being recorded, and so if anyone would like a copy of the recording after today's session, please don't hesitate to get in touch, and I'm more than happy to share that with you. You'll probably notice you've already been automatically muted and videos disabled, and so if you do have any questions during today's webinar, if you perhaps just pop those into the Q&A function, which I think you can see on your screen. And so just to highlight, there's a chat function and a Q&A. So if you pop your questions into the Q&A, it just helps us track them a little bit more easily. So over the next 40 minutes or so, you'll get to meet some of the Roche Diagnostics team, hear about the work that they're doing in Ireland. You'll also hear about some of the Enterprise Ireland companies they've worked with or are working with, including a guest speaker from one of those companies. We'll then go through the application process and timeline, as well as outlining the assessment criteria, as well as what Roche will be looking for. We'll then go to the Q&A. We've already received a number of questions in advance of the webinars, so we're going to do our best to try and cover as many of those as we can in the first instance. And then we also have left time if there's any questions that come through live during today's webinar. So I would like to start by introducing the team from Roche. So if you can maybe start putting your cameras on. So I'm going to go to Ravi first of all. Ravi, whenever you've managed to unmute yourself and put your camera on, can I ask you to briefly introduce yourself?
Yeah, thanks, Mary-Claire. So hi, everyone. My name is Ravi Chan. I'm Head of Business Development for Roche Diagnostics, UK and Ireland. Been with the company for 3 years, rejoined after about 7 years out. But here, really looking forward to the webinar today and helping startups in Ireland.
Super, thanks, Ravi. And if I can go to you next, Julia.
Hi, everyone.
I should say Julia's having technical issues today, so you're going to hear from her, no camera.
Yeah, apologies to everyone. My camera will not connect. So good morning, everyone. My name is Julia Eads, and I'm the Market Access Manager for Women's Health for UK and Ireland. And I work in a team of other market access managers split across different disease and therapy areas. And I've been with Roche about 5 or 6 years now. All right, thank you, Mary-Claire.
Thanks, Julia. And I'll come to you next, Jared.
Yeah, hi, everybody. Thanks for joining today. So I'm Jared, and I head up innovation for Roche Diagnostics in the UK and Ireland.
Thank you. And I'm next going to go to you, Len. So I might actually hand over to you if you can perhaps introduce yourself and tell us a little bit more about Roche Diagnostics.
Thanks very much, Mary-Claire, and good morning to everybody on this call. And on behalf of my colleagues here as well, we're delighted to be part of this initiative with Enterprise Ireland. Just a little bit about Roche. We're as you may be aware, that we're the largest biotechnology company in the world in terms of medicines, but equally we're one of the market leaders when it comes to in vitro diagnostics. So we enjoy that very unusual position of being able to work across areas such as disease screening, diagnostics, prognostics, and personalized healthcare that can ultimately lead into pharmaceutical decision making as well. So it's a pretty broad scope as an organization. And how we function that is that we function under two divisions. We've got our pharma division and we have our diagnostics division that myself and my colleagues represent here on the call today. But we're also, I guess when it comes to innovation, we're like everyone else here on the call. We're always trying to look at the unmet needs that are out there that exist in healthcare and come up with solutions then as well that can mitigate them. And for that, for us, it's very important that we're not focusing on a singular test parameter. We're looking at a whole integration in terms of the patient or even the person before they even have a disease pathways. I'll talk a little bit more in a while about what our presence is like in Ireland, but I think in a way of reflection, it would be great to kind of I'm going to play a little video about us celebrating 125 years of existence as a company. And as this kind of ties it all together in terms of why Roche and companies on this call today are in that innovation space when it comes to diagnostics and for better outcome for patients. So Mary Claire, if you want to maybe run that video, it's very short, only a minute and a half. We could give you a sense of purpose as to why we exist in what we do.
Can I just check, has the video come up on screen?
Yeah.
It has. Super. Perfect.
It is the future that calls us, our history that forms us. It is a passion that drives us for doing now what patients need next. Together as one, we pursue a better tomorrow. An ever-forward evolution of discoveries across boundaries, among partners, beyond failures, around the world. There are countless reasons why we do what we do every single day. But at the core, it is about our most precious gift: life. Life in all its beauty and its complexity. Life as moments to be experienced, shared and remembered. Life as possibilities beyond the horizon. Life transformed by science, from despair to hope. In 2021, we come together to celebrate where we have been, what we're doing, and where we'll go next. To celebrate 125 years. To celebrate all of us. To celebrate the future. We come together to celebrate life.
We are here together to celebrate life.
So that video gives a kind of a flavor of where we've kind of come from and where we are today. And in a way, it's kind of apt that a company with 125 years of experience is available and amenable to share that knowledge and expertise with companies here in Ireland. And that's very important to us because, you know, we invest a lot into R&D every year. We're probably one of the largest investors into R&D across diagnostics and pharmaceuticals, but we don't do it just on our own, right? We rely on what's happening into the future with companies who are in that innovation space to collaborate and learn from as much as we develop our own internal programs. So that's kind of sets the genesis of why we're interested in working with EI and companies and clients of EI, is to try and share our knowledge to support those companies in accelerating their R&D into the next phase. But in terms of how we set up and structure, so we are a Swiss company and we take a model whereby we affiliate different parts of our organization. And what I mean by that is that in Ireland today, we're part of Roche Diagnostics UK and Ireland as an affiliate. We're an entirely independent organization in how we operate in those respective markets. And in fact, we support markets further in afield as well, into Israel, Cyprus, Iceland, and Malta, and Cyprus as well. But the piece about it is that in Ireland over the last number of years, we've worked very closely with a lot of Irish companies who've been part of Enterprise Ireland's clients and programs. These include companies like Siriset based in Limerick, Technopat in Tipperary, and even on the manufacturing side of things, there's Sanmina in Fermoy. And those type of partnerships are very important, because what's happening in healthcare, and particularly in pathology services, is getting more complex. And what I mean by that is that when we develop solutions, we have to be able to integrate them to be able to provide the best options to laboratories, to have a broad menu of tests and technology available to them. And it's often the case that we may not even carry some of those solutions, but we build out an ecosystem of partners, which we refer to as managed laboratory systems or managed laboratory services as well. So in that environment, as I said, we've worked with a lot of Irish-based companies over the last number of years and continue to do so. And today you'll find Roche technology and solutions in every single hospital in Ireland and in Northern Ireland across the UK, based on the fact we have such a large, broad portfolio as well. But we are reliant on partners to support us in that. When it comes then to innovation and identifying partners whom we potentially could work with into the future, we've built a number of programs, incubator programs, innovation programs globally. And one of those programs is actually called Startup Creosphere. And the original Startup Creosphere model was based in Germany, in Munich. And now we have multi-locations throughout the world in that. And it was quite fortuitous that one of the companies that have gone through that program recently is a company actually based in Cork. And that's called Redicare. And Redicare are a digital therapeutic company. And I'm going to introduce Andrew Shepherd, the clinical lead from Redicare, to talk about maybe a little bit about his own company, but also about his experience in working in a Roche environment such as Startup Creosphere. Because what I'd like to try and impress as well is that these type of incubator programs are, I suppose, global. And what we're trying to establish with EI here is a very local one here in Ireland. So it's directly working with Irish-based organizations. So Andrew, if I hand over to yourself, maybe you can just talk us through a little bit about your company, but also as well your experiences with Roche throughout the Startup Creosphere program.
No problem at all. Thanks, Glenn. And apologies, my camera has decided to malfunction, but I'll get it back on now if you give me 2 seconds. There we go. Super. Yeah, thanks, Glenn. No, delighted to be here and celebrate the launch of this. And yeah, so I suppose going back, originally we had a long-standing relationship with Roche. We'd used your point of care device, the Cobas B101, for about 5 or 6 years now, and we were selected, as you said, for the Creosphere Accelerator program. I think, God, with COVID, as time flies, we think it was actually back in October of 2020. And actually, to your point as well, then collaboration and partnership are critical to the success of any startup, but especially in digital tech. So yeah, I mean, through the Creosphere program, which went on for months and in the best possible way, was quite intense. We had loads of support, loads of input. We found Roche to be a super supportive partner, very open and engaged. And we had exposure to many different divisions within Roche, actually. I remember at one stage talking about PCOS. We were in touch with the PCOS group. We were talking with diagnostics in Australia, literally global introductions at the drop of a hat, which was incredible. So we had introduction to leaders across many therapeutic areas. And we went on to co-create a joint offering with Roche point of care diagnostics division. So, I mean, we just found it an incredible collaboration, and to have access to mentorship from a world-leading multinational company like Roche was invaluable.
Thanks a lot for that, Andy. And it's great to get that feedback as well, because your company, in one regard, would be at the commercialization phase of your own journey. And I suppose in the Creosphere environment, that's one of the focal areas is that if you can take a company that's commercializing, how can we connect with that company and integrate and push forward in a mutual way? I guess bringing it back to today, though, as well, that type of mentorship as well is something that we're going to focus on in the program with Enterprise Ireland. And the type of companies that we're ideally looking at would be companies or spinouts that are around the 4 to 6 TRL levels. And it's at that juncture we've found is that it's often getting that signposting even and the mentoring as well about how you can look towards commercialization in the future, but maybe looking what can be done now. And that's the type of expertise we'd like to actually bring to the fore when we engage with companies involved in the EI program here in Ireland. So, when we sat down with Enterprise Ireland, we were trying to understand a bit more about the clients and the stages that they're at. And we started to kind of consider what type of a company would we look to work with in this initial phase of the program. So ideally, this would be an Irish-owned and headquartered startup and/or Irish university spinout. the technologies that we're looking at would be in that disruptive space. And in fairness, that's what we see when it comes to innovation, that level of disruption that can actually make an impact to address an unmet need in diagnostics. Innovations for us really, I suppose, will be across our core areas of interest. And that spans quite broadly across cardiovascular disease, oncology, infectious disease, women's health, and neurodegenerative diseases as well. So it's across that spectrum. We're looking at companies who are operating in that space, be it a diagnostic test or be it a digital healthcare type solution. Then you think about the applications, and traditionally and conventionally, blood samples go to the lab and labs test for what's been asked for, send it back. But that's completely changing now. Particularly COVID has exemplified that when you consider home testing for COVID antigen testing. Like, who would have thought we'd be doing something like that 2 years ago? But that's the way the landscape has changed in healthcare. That yes, you have your core laboratories, but the testing now in vitro diagnostics is really moving from secondary care to primary care to at home. And even at home, it borders between at-home testing and at-home sampling, where the sample can be in turn taken at home and sent to a centralized laboratory. So the applications of the type of solutions that we're looking at will be very broadly across the whole spectrum now, not just in a laboratory-based environment. So I hope that gives you kind of a flavor of why we're interested in working with EI and clients of EI, and maybe a sense of what we can offer. So I'll hand back to Mary Claire, and maybe we can start going through some of the pre-submitted questions that have been put through, Mary Claire.
That's been really helpful. Thanks, Len, and also Andy. So I'm actually going to invite Jared to join me now. If you can maybe start to cover off kind of some of the high-level, top-level information in terms of applying and the process, and I'm going to attempt to share the actual application form. Over to you, Jared.
Yeah, no, fantastic. Thanks, Mary Claire. And so there's been questions about the application form, so we're going to actually walk you through the application form in a second. Actually, I'll tell you what, let's just dive into it now, because the dates I was going to cover are actually covered in this first part here. And Mary Claire is going to send out the link to this application form later on today. And if you're watching this webinar in the coming days, please get in contact with Mary Claire to get a copy of the application form. So the closing date, that was one of the questions we had, is Tuesday, the 10th of May at 6 p.m. And we'll be announcing the shortlisted companies who will be invited to Pitch Day in June on the 27th of May. It's a really straightforward application process that we put together here, and we've really tried to put ourselves in the shoes of busy startups. And so we've broken it down into three kind of simple sections. So section one is very straightforward. It should only take you a minute or two to do. It's just capturing your contact details. And if we go to the next section. So here, question 7, we always want to hear founder stories. So what was that original spark, the original inspiration that motivated you to want to develop the solution? And we'd love to just hear in a couple of sentences, just what was that original kind of inspiration that brought you into the healthcare area and wanting to make an impact for patients. 8 is, when did you start working on the technology? When did you establish your company? Sections 9, 10, and 11 are really to just help us classify the type of innovation, where do you think it's going to be used, what disease and condition area. And if the labels we have there don't match exactly with what you're working on, there's the other section there. So just put it in your own language where you think you're focusing. We'd love to know here in question 12, so what's your value proposition? We're not looking for a PhD thesis here on value propositions. It's 2, maximum 3 paragraphs where you tell us about who you see the customer to be and the patient to be in the future when you commercialize your technology. What's your hypothesis regarding their key needs? What do you consider your offering to be? What would it look like? And what would be the benefits to customers and patients? So a couple of paragraphs to capture that. if you can briefly summarize any kind of work you've done to validate the customer need. And it could be from talking to GPs or clinical lab managers or people working in labs. Might be a patient organization you've spoken to. It might be a little focus group you've done or some research you've done via Google, whatever it might be. But we just love to understand what's that evidence piece you've done to understand the needs of the patients and the customers. And if you've got any quotes and any bit of feedback, that would be great to include that as well. Having said that, if you've only done a very, very kind of low level piece of evidence generation, that's fine. Don't feel as if, oh, I can't apply to this program because of that. Please apply anyhow. And any evidence generation that you've done in terms of clinical evidence generation, simulations, tissue-based work that you may have done to gather evidence about the technology. If you can include that, that would be brilliant as well. But just summarize it in a couple of paragraphs. Len mentioned technology readiness levels. I actually was talking to a startup yesterday in London who had never heard of technology readiness levels. So if you haven't heard of technology readiness levels, there are thousands and thousands of publications. It's a common language developed by the space industry. There's 9 levels. Level 1 is you've got an idea and a post note. Level 9 is you're ready to go, you're live and commercializing it in an operational environment. There are a number of translations done for the medtech life sciences space. So I'd recommend, if you're unfamiliar with technology readiness levels, to just have a look at what that means. And approximately, where are you today? And where do you expect to be in 2 years' time? And 16, if your solution was a commercial success, what impact for patients does your innovation provide? Again, 1, maybe 2 paragraphs max. 17, we'd love to hear your thoughts on where you think Roche would be able to accelerate your startup if you took part in the mentorship program. So what are the big gaps that you see in terms of your knowledge, skills, and capabilities? And if we go to the next section, and so there's an opportunity here, because this is one of the questions that came in about uploading documents. So again, we're not asking for a lot of additional work from you here. It should be stuff you already have. So the team roles, we'd love to know who's the team, short bios, and who is responsible for what. Any investment, grants, funding, awards that you've received, we'd love to understand, what that is, how much you got, what was the source and the date you got it, and summary of IP status and ownership. And we're not asking for any confidential information at this stage. We estimate the form based on what we've just gone through. It's 2, maybe 3 hours work maximum for you to do. If you've got any questions and you're thinking, I'm not sure this technology is a perfect match with cardiovascular or oncology or the focus areas for Roche, we'd really encourage you to apply anyhow, because we might be able to see connections between the solution you're working on and other innovations that we're working on in the future as well. So thanks, Marie-Claire, and I'll hand back over to you.
Great, thank you so much, Jared. So perhaps we can move to you, Len. I know we've touched on some of what you're going to talk about already, but if you can maybe cover a little bit more detail in terms of how you're going to shortlist and perhaps what you're looking for at the actual pitch.
Sure, okay. Well, as Jared went through the actual application form, you can see there's various different headings and questions that we've prepared. And what we'll take in is we'll take those application forms back internally then, and we've selected a group of between 4 to 5 individuals from Roche who have experience in shortlisting for these type of events, but also as well, they have a lot of experience, but it's broad. We have people from market access, we have people from health economics, innovation, technology. They get that kind of independent type view of the application forms as they're returned. That team of people who do the shortlisting exercise, they'll be looking for the signs of disruption in the innovation, the real medical value, like what is the medical value proposition that comes through in the application, a confirmation of the customer needs, or be it pathology or be it digital, and the innovations that make an impact on the patients. The other part about it, and Jared touched off, is the TLR levels, right? So we'll be thinking about, how could this innovation be operationalized or commercialized into the future, and what would be involved in that. So when this team is reviewing the applications, they're also thinking that matching piece. How does this match with what we can offer at Roche to that company? So that gives a flavor in terms of the shortlist.
Sorry, remember to take myself off mute. Thank you so much, Len. And I think now what I imagine a lot of our companies will be interested in is what Ravi is going to cover in terms of how the actual mentorship is going to work. So if you can perhaps take us through that, Ravi.
Yeah, no, thanks, Mary-Claire. So there's a couple of questions really around how will the mentoring work, and is it all going to be virtual, or can we do a bit of traveling to the Roche offices and things? I mean, our biggest thing is, I think this would work best if we can have some face-to-face meetings mixed in with virtual calls as well, where the mentoring, I think, works well, because it is about creating those relationships. And what we really want to do is, with the information, is propose a short program to support what suits you as innovators, and what works best in terms of your work practices, and then also give you the feedback, regular feedback, before sort of going live with the solution. I think mostly it probably will be virtually, but as much as we can, or maybe at least have 1 or 2 visits to the Roche site, to the Roche offices, that would work best, I think. And in terms of what expertise can innovators and submitters actually access from Roche, we have a number of colleagues are obviously on the call today, but around market access, which Julia will cover in a bit, but also access to expertise across different geographies around the world, because Roche is a multinational company, but also business model development. There's a lot of focus around health economics, and we have health economists within our teams in the UK who are very good, who understand the NICE processes as well. We also then have access to our regulatory experts, both in the UK and globally. And one of the other things that's important is about validating clinical needs. We have medical affairs teams who we have access to, again, in the UK and globally, and also looking at care pathway analysis, because that's one of the things that, as you develop those solutions, you need to understand what the impact of the solution is going to have on the care pathway. So all of this really leads on to how best to approach clinical evidence generation, and then also around the commercial aspects around sales and marketing. We have, again, good teams in the UK, in Ireland, and then also globally around good sales and marketing, and how you would go about commercializing that solution. So back over to you, Mary-Claire.
Brilliant. Thank you so much, Ravi. So just quickly before we go to Julia, so as Ravi, I think, mentioned there, Julia is going to talk a little bit about market access. So whenever we conclude this part of the webinar, I think we'll pretty much have covered most of the questions that we received from client companies in advance of the webinar. I can see there's a couple of questions that have been popped into the Q&A, but if there's any other questions that you might have at this stage that you don't feel have been covered, please don't hesitate to pop those into the Q&A, and we will cover those. So Julia, I might hand over to you to talk a little bit about what support in terms of market access is normally or can be provided to SMEs or startups in the diagnostic space.
Of course. Thank you, Mary-Claire. Hello again, everyone. I suppose my first piece of advice would be to have market access in your thoughts at the very beginning, regardless of where you are in the TRL pathway. The earlier the better, of course, but even when considering what evidence you want to gather to show the benefits of your product, think about how you are going to enter the market using that evidence, and is it the right evidence for you? Or if you've already obtained your evidence, how does that then fit into the market? And think about the market you are obviously thinking about, but also, are there any other markets that could benefit? I suppose I can go through a couple of elements within market access. For example, environmental assessment. How does it work now? What are the competitors that are already there? Do I need to counter what they do, or indeed could I work with those competitors? Could that benefit both parties? And we have done that quite recently. We did a big project with regards to preeclampsia in the UK, and we worked hand in glove really with our biggest competitor, and actually it turned out to be very good for both of us in the end. And how does the funding work within the existing system? Can I collect data even during research? That includes that health economic benefit of using my product. This will support the creation that's previously been mentioned of a really concise value proposition, something that meets a clear unmet need, but also resonates with the stakeholders and thus will lead to those patient benefits. And that stakeholder mapping, the practicalities of actually how to identify these stakeholders, we can support with that. Making sure not only to include those research and academic KOLs, but also those medics or practitioners that will be using your product day to day. And then, of course, not to forget those bodies that can encourage the use of your product, if not directly. For example, that would be patient charities, professional and national bodies, and really linking it into any national guidance or objectives that are existing or that are on the horizon, something that's going to change in the system that you can utilize so the patients can benefit from your product. And another important aspect to understand is the patient pathways, so current and future pathways. How will the introduction of this product disrupt or change that pathway in any way? We will need to consider upstream and downstream changes too. And this can often be very important if this adds time or money to another part of the pathway, or indeed does it reduce another part of the pathway with regard to time and money. And this leads you to, again, to understand that financial impact, particularly if a different department or division within a hospital or a healthcare system sees a benefit from introduction of your product in a different part of the pathway, or indeed actually if it impacts them negatively, time or money wise. We need to consider that if you're looking at a business case submission to get funding locally rather than nationally, how does that whole work stream work and how does it need to be considered? We've been, as a company, we've been through this process ourselves, but also in support of other companies several times and across several different disease areas. And of course, there are often differences, but in essence, the processes we need to go through and the things we need to consider and the questions that we can help you answer remain the same in essence. And we do continue to learn each time, and hopefully we can go forward and learn together. This is a bit of a taster of market access, so I hope it's been useful. And thank you, and back to you, Marie-Claire.
That's fantastic. Absolutely a taster. I think there's a lot more to know and to learn, but I love that comment about learning together, both from the multinational and the SME or the startup. So before we move to the quick Q&A, I might ask all of our Roche panelists to join me by turning their cameras on. It's very lonely. And I'm just going to go to our panel very quickly just to check, have you any other comments that you'd like to make before we pop into the live Q&A? I think, Jared, you might have had something.
Yeah, I mean, it's just really to stress one or two things. So one is our culture is actually very informal. And I think you might have got a hint of that from Andy. We're very easygoing, very easy to work with. So I think that's important for the startup to know. And the other thing is really, Ravi kind of touched on this. The whole program is actually designed around your bespoke needs as a startup. So right at the very start, we'll spend time with you to really kind of understand where are the big gaps. If you knew this, how would it help you to accelerate, de-risk and be much more successful? So we'll spend time really understanding what your specific gaps are, but also what's your bandwidth to absorb information over the 12-week period. And on the basis of that, we'll design this very, very bespoke program for you. And it could be a couple of hours a week where you're talking to different Roche people, but factoring in that you'll need some kind of time away from Roche, if we talk through a patient pathway analysis, for you to do some work yourself and then come back to us. So it's really that kind of informal, bespoke program, but it's also designed with your bandwidth in mind as well over the 12 weeks. So I just wanted to stress that point.
Super, thanks Jared. Len, Ravi, Julia, have you anything else you'd like to add, or we can move to the Q&A?
This actually ties in quite nicely with what Jared just described, because it came up as a question in advance of the call this morning. And the question was around, like, well, what are you looking for in a pitch? And it ties in exactly to the type of company we would look to work with, as Jared described. But essentially with the pitch, it's not so much about the technology. Yes, technology is very important, but it's more about that story behind innovation and the impact that the innovation can have on patients and what difference it can make to the healthcare of the system of a country, for example. So I think that scaling mindset. But this is quite important because it goes back to that matching of culture, and we want that experience to be really, really positive for the company that comes through, and to that often is centered around relationship as well as the collaboration. So thinking down the line, the pitch, we will give some guidance to the shortlisted companies, but just bearing that in mind, it's about that resonating with the values that you have as a company. Do they match the values that Roche have as well?
Thanks, Len. And I actually, it just reminded me, I think it's really important that you touched on, the health system and, adding value to the ecosystem in the country. And I have to say, I absolutely loved the video that we selected today about life, and it reminds us that all of the work that, that we're doing in the diagnostic space is about health. It's about people, it's about human life. So we'll move to the Q&A. There are a number of questions in there. Just try and remove that so I can still see everyone. So I'm just going to ask them as I see them in no particular order. So the first one is, I'm a university researcher working with an Irish SME as part of an industrial funded research project. Can I apply for the programme in conjunction with the SME, or must I be an employee of the company?
So I'll take that question. Firstly, it's great that you're involved in an industrial-based program, and it shows that great relationship between universities and the industry environment as well. And the key thing to this is about sitting down with the SME company, explaining a little bit about the program, what you've learned today about it, what your ambition is if you were to apply, and trying to understand then, is there any obstacles as to why the SME along with yourself wouldn't apply for this? But obviously it depends on what type of agreement you have currently with that SME in terms of the work you're working on. So definitely just sit down with the SME and understand potentially how you'd like to approach this. But as well as that, keep the communication channels open with ourselves, and we can give you a few pointers as well.
So the next one I think is quite interesting. So this one kind of more looks at the global aspect that the program may offer. So the attendee, the delegate says, we're in touch with Roche Diagnostics partnering team in Switzerland and the US. Should we still consider applying to the program, or should we stay with the connection to Roche that we already have?
Yeah, I can probably start on that one. So I think so it's great actually that you're in contact with our partnering teams. I think if you're at that partnering level discussion, you'll be beyond, I think, TRLs 4 to 6, probably a little bit beyond the scope of applying for the program. However, suggest you get in touch with Ravi, Len, and myself in case there's any way we're able to help and support the conversations you're having with the partnering teams, or if there's anyone else we think we can introduce you to at Roche. So feel free to get in contact with us.
Brilliant. So we really, as far as I can see, there's only one other question. So unless there's any others, I'm going to cover that, and then I'll probably start to wrap up in our final few moments. So the question is, as a startup that's already commercially active, but only just in Ireland and the UK, with some conflicting solutions, would this be seen as too much of a conflict? I'm not sure if that makes complete sense.
Is it worth maybe getting in contact with you, Marie-Claire, to just understand a little bit more about?
Yeah, I think so. So I don't know who's asked this question. It's come in anonymously. So yeah, I think perhaps if you ever asked that question, if they can maybe clarify what they mean by conflicting solutions.
Would they be able to come off mute? Is that an option if they wanted to?
Happy for them to come off mute, but I think I need to know who it is to take them off mute.
Or maybe best.
Well, maybe not put anyone on the spot,
Yeah.
but I'm happy to receive that question in more detail, and we can come back with a more detailed response, hopefully. So I suppose that really brings us to the end of today's webinar. I'd like to firstly wish the best of luck to all of our applicants. Thank you so much to the Roche Diagnostics team for providing this opportunity to Irish businesses. I think Andy has already had to pop off to another event, but thanks so much to Andy and to the ReadyCare team for sharing your insights. And I suppose just a final reminder for our client companies on the next steps. The questionnaire will go out to you today, so I'm going to send that out to everyone that's registered for today's webinar. Closing date for applications, as Jared mentioned, is 10th of May, and the shortlisted companies will be notified on the 27th of May. So I'm going to hand back finally for final comments to our panel, and I'll maybe come to you, Len, first, if that's okay.
So thanks, Mary Claire, and I hope people on the call today got a lot out of it. It's the first time that we're doing this as well, and we're very open to get more feedback, more questions. If there are more questions, you can address them directly to ourselves, and Mary Claire can provide our contact details. But we're very excited about this project that we're working on, and we'd like to see it to be successful. But as Jared said, it'll all be built, the program will be all built around your company. And that's really something that will be new for us as well. So that level of partnership, co-creation, all those great type of, type of goals that we set will be really exciting as we hit into the end of the year when we get to work with that company. But partly funds the journey as well. So we're looking forward to the event later on in June. So maybe Jared, do you have a few words?
Yeah, no, thanks, Len. Thanks everybody for joining. And I mean, I'll honestly say I joined Roche Diagnostics 3 years ago, and the breadth and range of expertise across the company is absolutely amazing. And if I was a startup, it's just the opportunity to just receive mentorship and coaching and guidance from so many different people at Roche is just a really great opportunity. And even recently, we coached a company in the Oxford AHSN Accelerator, and they went on to win the £100,000 prize and win that accelerator. We're coaching other companies in the UK as part of the MedCity program as well. So we're actually very active in helping and supporting startups. You can tell from my accent that I'm really proud to be back working and supporting the Irish ecosystem as well, and really looking forward to seeing companies apply for this program and meeting the companies on pitch day. So thanks for listening in today, and I hope you take advantage of the opportunity that's available to you. And over to Julia. Sorry, Mary Claire.
No, go ahead. I didn't want to put anyone on the spot. I was just checking.
I'll
but
pass
yeah,
the
over
ball
to you,
to
Julia. We're going to put you on the spot anyway.
I know, Gerard, it's fine. Yeah, really just to echo what Gerard and Ravi have said, that as a company, we're very relaxed and approachable, and we're happy to support and help. And I guess I'll leave with the two words that Mary Claire picked out from my discussion earlier was learning together. Yeah.
Lovely. Well, I like that. And Ravi, do you want to have the final word?
No, just to add, I think we are really excited to be part of this program. The more we can do in terms of helping startups, we are very aware that Roche, as large as it is, doesn't necessarily have the monopoly on innovation that happens out of universities, out of startups, and that's effectively that's where we want to work. That the people we want to work with are there. So please do apply, and look forward to working with you.
Brilliant. Thank you so much, everyone. So I think we're going to close it there. My contact details are on screen. If anyone does have any other questions at all, please don't hesitate to get in touch. Otherwise, have a great day, and we look forward to seeing the programme roll out. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you. Goodbye.
Bye. Bye-bye.